Okay.
Long story short.
Just want to welcome everyone to Faith-Based Development Concepts. Welcome as we start to wrap up here. So we have 3 presenters today. Lee Berg, Sebastian, is it Cordano?
Oh, so close. Torredino.
Cordino, I'm sorry, Cordino. I was going to check beforehand. And then Katie McKenna. So we want to just welcome them and thank them for being with us today. I will have announcements at the end just as far as follow-up, and so I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to you all.
Well, thank you for that gracious intro. We appreciate it. And welcome, everyone. Thank you for humoring me and moving to the front half of the room so that I, in a lot of ways, like having a smaller group because we can have more conversation and a little bit more friendly feeling for one of the last sessions of the day. But so first we'll start by introducing ourselves, and then would love to hear from you all who is in the room and why you picked this session, so we can make sure to hit on all of the things that you're interested in. With that, I'm Katie McKenna. I'm on the real estate development team at Archway Communities. This is the first time I've been to Chisholm, but really I'm excited to see some familiar faces from being at the Archway table yesterday, and I'm excited to be having conversation about how faith-based organizations and affordable housing providers can couple up to solve much-needed challenges and tackle really tough issues related to real estate in ways that kind of create benefits and assets for our community that weren't there before. Lee?
And I'm Lee Berg. I'm pastor of Washington Park, UCC here in Denver, and chairperson of the board of Archway, and now a part of the Chisholm board. So as of Wednesday, as of yesterday. So Archway started 27 years ago. UCC layperson named David Nestor heard a sermon, became convinced that something needed to be done to provide affordable housing in Colorado, and called up his friend from 8th grade, Rob Lapp, and said, "Rob, can we do something?" And so they started working on it, and along the way developed the Colorado, I think, helped get past the laws that developed the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority and other things along the way. And one of the realizations that Rob had, David had, Sebastian, and others have had is churches who have more property and building than they have people to support it are potentially great partners for repurposing buildings and land. Part of Archway's commitment and what we do here is we also provide access to social services through our buildings, which is actually I attribute it to Rob's wife, Jan, who was a social worker herself. And so what we try to do is make sure not only is housing affordable, but the support services are there to enable people to access those services in a way that allows them not just to have housing, but to thrive in the housing. So that's part of who we are. That's
I'm Sebastian Cordino. I'm the president of Archway, and I think we just did all the intro you need about that. Nice to see you all.
So we'd love to go around the room next, and if you don't mind, if I put you on the spot first, I'll give you a warning. Would love to hear who you are, where you're from, and if you are part of a congregation that's actively working on a potential real estate investment in affordable housing, or just interested. Tell me just a little bit more about why you ended up in this room this morning.
So my name is Jasmine Quinolly, and I am from Houston, Texas. I am on the board of Settergas Heights, which is an affordable family unit. I am the Minister of Missions at Pilgrim Congregational United Church of Christ, which has 3 202s. And I am a certified general real estate appraiser in Texas.
Well, thanks
So,
for
all
being
of- all of
here.
those
You wear all of those
I
hats.
wear all of those hats.
And I'm from Houston,
Are
born
you?
and raised.
Okay.
Check out
We'll
these-
talk
we gotta
later.
Check out
We'll
these
talk.
shoes.
Yeah,
That'll tell you all you need.
It does. We're good.
yeah, no. Church member gave me these when he couldn't wear them anymore.
That's really nice. Well, happy to have you. Jasmine speaks HUD. Everyone else doesn't have to. That's totally fine. Let's go to the next row right behind you.
I'm Brenda Booth. I'm the Executive Director of Isaiah 58 Ministries in St. Louis. We are a food ministry, but we are, this is interesting, hearing all this. Why did I choose this? Wasn't quite sure, but I'll say God led me here. We're in conversation. We've been housed in a church for 50 years. And that church is dwindling in membership and resources. And we're having conversations about inverting the relationship where we take control of the building and they're housed within us instead of us being housed within them. So what that would look like and how that would come to be is a question of, that we are currently asking and seeking answers to. So I'm visiting other ministries that have done similar stuff, and we're kind of excited to think of the possibilities of the building beyond a worship space. It's Compton Heights Christian Church, which is a Disciples of Christ church, but our ministry is ecumenical. So.
All right, next up.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sandy Sorensen. I am the director of the United Church of Christ Washington, D.C. Public Policy Office for a little bit longer, until March 31st, and then who knows what comes next, but there will be a next, so stay tuned. But I'm here for 2 reasons. One is my home congregation and First Congregational in Washington, D.C. tried this. It didn't quite work out, and I think we were sharing a little bit about that. So, I want to kind of hear more about how I want to hear more about your story, sort of see where maybe we missed some things. But the other thing is that I just think that these are best practices that these stories need to be brought back to places like HUD or Health and Human Services, or decision makers need to see that these things are possible. And instead of just getting the nope, we don't have, it's not going to work. Nope. You have the stories and the experiences to say, yeah, it can work, and here's how we did it, and here's what we need. And so to be able to, so making that policy connection, I think is just really, could be really valuable.
Yep, I love that. We'll make sure to bring that into the conversation too. And we've had our fair share of things that have worked and things that haven't worked, and we'll talk about it all. So it's not would love to hear more about your story, and this is hard stuff. There's not a simple, just follow this recipe and it works. All right, and for anyone who happened to come in late, we're just saying who you are, where you're from, and why you picked this session, or if you have any connection to faith-based housing development.
I'm Christina Ryan Perkins. I'm the chaplain in Crossroad Child and Family Services, and I've pastored, especially in Baltimore, congregations that have collaborated with communities. Strong City Baltimore was started as a grassroots effort in my church, and we didn't provide housing in the church, but we provided offices as they found opportunities to renew housing within the community. So I've looked at that in a variety of ways in congregations that I've gone into. I'm also a transitional coach for the Indiana Kentucky Conference, and part of what we talk about is we're trying to help congregations who are possibly selling their churches, but also shared ministry opportunities with organizations such as affordable housing and other community resources within their neighborhoods. So I want to be able to have some information for that, and with Crossroad, we're always looking for opportunities for when our children age out, where they're going next, and looking for the best ways to find affordable and supportive housing.
Great, thanks for coming. I didn't know that there were transitional coaches. That's really cool.
It's about a year and a half, but the intention is to, at various times of transition in our conference.
Yep, very cool. We'll go to the back and then we'll wind back up to the front.
I'm Sherry Presteman. I'm the conference minister in the Minnesota Conference UCC and was formerly the executive at Back Bay Mission in Biloxi, Mississippi. And that organization has decades of history with doing low-income housing rehabilitation. And then when I was there, we founded the Gulf Coast Housing Initiative, which was a whole new body of work building affordable housing, including supportive housing for homeless veterans. So I'm no longer doing that work, but I still remain very passionate about it. And also, Sue Art told me I had to be you guys. So here I am. She loves what you do.
Well, we love Sue here at the.
Hi everyone, I am Alina Shervana from Embrace Living Communities. I'm chief of staff, but we are a non-profit, so I wear many hats. One being working in most of the projects that are happening, and we are trying to develop more. We do senior affordable housing and affordable housing for people with disabilities, 18 and older. All of our projects are Section 8, 202 or 811. We have 30 communities in Illinois, Missouri, and Florida, and we serve about 2,500 residents. Our waiting lists are 2 to 5 years. A lot of applications come to all of the buildings, but not a single day passes by without me in the corporate office getting calls or emails that make me cry. And I am here because you do the same here, and I want to learn more from you. I think that's the key. We have to learn from each other and to learn how to collaborate with churches and how to, because we are faith-based, our mission is really important, and you all are mission-driven. So this is my second time with CHSM. I've been on different calls with CHSM groups, and I think that's the key for us to learn how to work together and to make things happen and to develop more affordable housing, because this demand is only increasing. All the numbers show that it's increasing. And we serve the very low income people, and we are taking people from the streets. I shared recently a story of one of our residents that said that she kissed the floor when she went in the house because for years she was homeless. Or people that are in our social services programs. We have social service coordinators in each building that tell how small things like a walking challenge change their health, and now they are mentoring other residents, and how community is important, and how it's a home, not just bricks and mortar. So yeah, I used to be a journalist, so I used to like speaking a lot.
We appreciate it.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rosine Guebda. I'm with Enterprise Community Partners, and Enterprise is a national nonprofit that works on increasing the supply of affordable housing, and we also work with economic mobility, building resilience, and advancing racial equity. I'm here because of our faith-based development initiative, and it's a process by which we help mission-driven and faith-based organizations actually learn how to develop properly. So we give you the tools via training, we link you up with experts, and we provide technical assistance, and we also do provide grants. So we help churches develop their property, if I can put it in such terms. Thank you for having me.
So glad you're here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Arlene Nearing. I'm the senior minister at Eden United Church of Christ in Hayward, California. My campus is teeming with energy. It is not underutilized, but I can look 360 degrees around me, and I see all kinds of congregations that have way underutilized space. I'm really concerned about the loss of resources that I see potentially just washing out the door
because congregations have not been thoughtful about the stewardship of their campuses. And I'm actively working all the time at trying to get them to think about things like this. Unfortunately, we do not have anybody on staff in the conference who specializes in transitional work. So I'm just a volunteer.
Not just a
Never
volunteer.
just.
The lifeblood of any
No,
organization.
and I know you got assigned to us, but do you have?
I did get assigned. However, I'm Zaria Davis. I am the Chisholm Scholar for this year. I'm a student at Eden Theological, but I actually work with different nonprofits, and one of them is an organization in Chattanooga called NARAB, and they're the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, and they have really been, they actually asked me to join them because of my work in the social justice space, as well as looking at housing inequities. So actually this is good for me because I think I'll be able to learn some things that I can actually take back to the group. And so one of the things that we're going to be looking at is affordable housing and what type of properties currently exist in the Chattanooga area and how we can support communities. So I'm in the right place.
That organization.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
And I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to share a bit of a story. I was a Southern Baptist minister for my early ministry life and served a church in Meridian, Mississippi. We integrated, and about 8 months later I was gone. 277, 246, but who's counting? So I went to work for the National Education Association in Washington, D.C., and there's a Human and Civil Rights Division, and was a far right specialist. And we worked on legislation with various social justice groups in D.C. that impacted public education. And we were working on some legislation. We went to this office of the United Church of Christ Social Justice Office. And I picked up materials that I knew that I had a denominational home if I ever headed back into ministry, because I read about this social justice denomination and where I wouldn't have to fight for women in ministry, where I wouldn't have to fight for LGBTQ individuals being seen not only as created in the image of the divine, but capable of being called by God into ministry and leading churches and denominations and so forth. And it all started with Sandy, so or at least her office. And when I came out to Colorado, working in our Denver office, was living in Boulder and joined Community UCC in Boulder, and that began my journey. And then I was given I went to our pastor and I said, look, I've got this theological education. I think, there might be part-time churches or that need an interim or something. I'd be glad to help. Eventually I became interim pastor at Community UCC in Boulder, and then Washington Park. I'm designated pastor there. And Sue Art helped make that happen, and she's a dear friend. So quickly, need to get to the meat of it. One of our failures was a congregation called Christ Congregation on South Sheridan here in Denver. And they called up Sue and said, we're done. Who do we give the keys to? And it suddenly became the conference problem, and I was on the conference board at the time. And for 6 months it was fine because we had another congregation meeting there while they remodeled their sanctuary, Columbine actually. And but then Columbine finished, moved out. Archway was involved trying to make this happen, working as hard as Archway could work to make it happen. And we couldn't get past a city council person, and the struggles there wound up selling the church to an evangelical congregation, which upset some of our folks because that wasn't what we had dreamed of. make a long story short, while it was in between, I would go there sometimes twice a week and either meet the police and walk through the building to move homeless individuals out if they were actually there. They seemed to always know when we were going to show up. But it was not lost on me that I was walking into a building that we were hoping to turn into a place where homeless individuals, low-income individuals would have a place to be. And we just didn't make it happen. And the word of wisdom is we need to start early to try to make these things happen so the problems can be addressed and worked out as best we can. So with that, I'll sit down and be quiet and let Katie take us through it.
Thanks so much, Lee, and thanks for sharing that story too, and one of the underlying takeaways that I hope all of you can bring back to your various parts and corners of the U.S. when you go home later on today or tomorrow. But and one of the reasons that I'm truly so excited to hear about a transitional coach who works with congregations, because really the time to start talking about this is not the day you want to turn your keys in. It's years before that. And we know, that these conversations are hard to have. A lot of folks who are part of various congregations never thought, remember the lively, bustling campus and never thought they would be in this situation. And here we are. And yet, that doesn't mean we can't face the hard challenge of change, but pursue it in a way that can be really healthy and reviving for a congregation and contribute to this really large and growing challenge of housing affordability and just be an amazing part of our communities. So, like I said, great to talk about successes and failures and really appreciate all of the deep experience that's in the room. So please, if there are things that I'm going to go through a couple of slides as I'm talking, if there are things that you can contribute, just flag me and I will make sure that everyone gets the floor. Oops. So we shared Archway and who we were and kind of some of our background. One of the way that Archway is thinking about this work is named it Archway Housing Advisory. But the important piece about it is having this combination of financial support, which we are still in the process of working on, but know that it's a really critical part because the things that we need to do are not free. Access to experts. So all of us, and many of us sitting in this room are experts in housing and housing development, but many folks in congregations aren't, and honestly don't need to be in order to do really transform a space that a congregation has been. Sometimes it's just who you know. You don't have to become the expert. You can just know and have access to the experts. And then capital and development. Let me tell you, I sit at my desk looking at spreadsheets for development projects. And yesterday I was looking at this project that could potentially be $79 million. And I walked down the street to 7-Eleven to get a bag of chips that was $1.49. And I was just like, how do these numbers even make sense to me? How do I understand $79 million and then my bag of chips, which I feel like has gone up from 99 cents recently. But we know, that the development is expensive work, real estate, the numbers are sometimes mind-boggling, but there are resources. There are public resources, there are private resources. There are many different ways that we can make this kind of development happen. And so as I was walking back from getting my bag of chips, I was remembering I don't have to focus on the $79 million. I can focus on all of the amazing people and partners who want to contribute to this project because what we're doing is worth it, worth the impact and worth the headache of the spreadsheet. So some of the reason, and I know I actually won't spend much time on this because this crowd knows, Our housing challenges have, my lens is Colorado, but I imagine each and every one of you would share stories about your own hometown, about how housing felt much more attainable years ago than it does today. So some of the things that we're looking at in Colorado, economic mobility, we're really experiencing a decline, and that's something, our end goal as Archway is to empower folks and help pool and provide the resources and the services and the housing to get folks to a place where they can experience economic mobility. And as housing becomes so much more challenging and rent is just going up and up, that vision of economic mobility and wealth generation is feeling more and more out of reach. And we're really holding on to housing is a really basic part of that foundation. And also that in Colorado, in Denver, and also beyond, where you live, where your home is really matters, and the access to resources, the opportunities that you have matter or depend on where your address is. And particularly if you don't have an address, the challenges of accessing schools and healthcare and even other basic benefits like food benefits and health benefits becomes really challenging. And so again, we come back to housing as a possible piece of the puzzle to move folks forward. Lee, did you want to talk a little bit more about supportive services?
No, you can go ahead, because if I get started, I'll.
Finally a happy hour.
Yeah.
Wait, I want to hear more about supportive services, because it's not only about housing, and it's about providing quality grocery stores in neighborhoods that are food apartheid, areas of food.
Absolutely, and.
Sorry.
Yeah, but the point is, if you, two of the last buildings that we've built and a senior housing project called Robinson Place coming online will have spaces for homeless veterans, and having particularly homeless veterans out of the Middle East, veterans of the Middle East, it presents a lot of challenges in buildings, and finally the VA and Archway have connected well enough to where those challenges are being met. Washington Park has been the home of the East Denver food pantry called Fish for years now, and we carry 60 bags of groceries 3 days a week to various families in a designated area because they live in food insecurity. Sometimes we're taking groceries to a Archway St. Francis Center partnered building called Cornerstone to deliver food to families in need there as well. As well as in our buildings, we have generally in every building access to a food pantry, access to food, so that the food needs can be met. In our buildings where we have a strong immigrant population, we're doing English as a second language. We're doing after-school programs for kids. We have vans that transport kids every now and then to special events and needs, and we partner with other nonprofits to help provide Christmas gifts and things like that for kids in our buildings. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. And the service that we're not yet fully developed on is providing access to health care to our residents in our buildings. And that's kind of it's not quite a moonshot dream, but there are lots of challenges in trying to make it happen. And we think we can make it happen eventually. But it takes funding. But yes, ma'am.
Just curious, are you able to serve people who have family members that don't have social security numbers?
I'm sure we do. Yeah.
We are,
That's great.
We have 4 buildings called the Mosaic Campus on the Johnson and Wales campus out in, I guess it's Aurora, isn't it?
Close to Aurora.
Yeah, and, but we have immigrants coming in, First Plymouth Church here that is dialogue with Washington Park as we try to figure out what to do with church buildings and land and how to best use those resources. But there is an ever-growing need for access to even transitional housing or temporary housing as well, which isn't something we're into right now, but.
One of the wonderful things about Colorado is that all public funding and public resources, not just housing related, but that's of course what I see the most, we're actually not allowed to discriminate against folks who are undocumented with Colorado state resources. Now, of course, you know, at the federal level, that's a different story, and so we often have to map, okay, so this federal money is in a project, what was the administration like at the time, and what were the rules, because of course we know there are also things like in 2006 when federally, we were not allowed to put any money towards folks who are undocumented. So it's a complex story, but it's something that Archway and many others in Colorado are really committed to untangling. And similarly with the services that we provide, I'll talk a little bit more about the types of buildings and what the actual real estate development looks like. But one of the amazing things about our services team is that everything is customized and based on resident feedback. So some places where we build, there's a grocery store right down the road, and that's not the highest need. Maybe access to after-school programming is the highest need. And then at a senior building, after-school programming is not the thing. And so really being thoughtful and taking the feedback from residents about what they need, and also being open to those needs change over time. The first year that someone moves into a stable place is so much different than the 5th year, than the 10th year that they've had that stability. And so having the commitment to provide services without being so rigid of it has to be X, Y, and Z everywhere is something that I think Archway really shines at. So moving on, let's talk a little bit more about the actual real estate. Sorry, I'm trying to decide which slides I want to skip through. So if anyone sees anything you don't want me to skip, let me know. Real estate development can be relatively complex. It sometimes can feel like every site is different, and you know there's not a recipe. And in some ways that's true. In other ways, I think having the experience and the track record and the successes and failures that Archway has achieved and just lived through really make a difference when approaching a property. Because even if a property may be unique and individual, all of that background experience with funders, with contractors, with engineering, with site design, with various markets really matter. And so one of the things I'm starting to check off some of my tips, first being don't start the day you need to turn the keys in. Second being really work with some experts. You don't need to be experts yourself. As Archway, we're in Colorado, but would love to stay in touch with you all. Enterprise is another really great resource, a national resource for this. I would recommend working with experts.
And a resource for staff too, Enterprise is. Thank you
yes,
very much.
Absolutely, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Rosina's a good person for everyone to meet before you leave. One of the other things that we think about is not only building homes, but building homes for the future, building homes that will be sustainable and resilient places long into the future. And climate justice is a part of that. So thinking about things like carbon cutting. Water standards are so important here in the West, where we don't have the water that we need everywhere and need to be really conscious of that. Also resilience, as the climate is changing, natural disasters. Here we think a lot about flooding and fire mitigation in different parts of the country where you are. You know, you want to be thinking about not just what's right for the next 5 years in a particular place. What is it going to look like in 50, in 75? Because buildings, I mean, we all know a brick house or building in our neighborhood, or some of the church buildings, I imagine, that are 100 more years old. And so really considering, these are things that that often I hear as we're trying to be mission focused. Some of this sustainability and kind of future thinking could fall by the wayside because, you think about a price tag and is that just adding on to my $79 million? But it's really worth focusing on how this place that you're creating will be part of your community for a long time into the future. So this is a map of Colorado. For those of you who are just here for a couple of days, we have a nice square, really simple state. And most of the work that Archway has done, these darker yellow areas, we call this kind of the Front Range in Colorado. So most of our work has been in that area. That also happens to be where most folks in Colorado live. We've got some really great buildings under construction. In various parts of the state that I'll show you in just a minute. So getting to the meat of how something actually gets started. The first thing is identifying the opportunity. So making sure, whether you're sitting in the seat in a congregation or congregational leadership, or kind of coming at it from the seat of a church, or whether you're coming at it from a seat of a human services or social services partner with a church, identifying the opportunity. So think in your mind for a minute now of wherever you spend time that kind of drew you to come to this session, and put your most creative hat on and think, what could be there? Could it be a wonderful services hub that has space for worship and maybe there's housing involved? Some of the things, and a lot of our churches in the U.S., or this actually isn't specific to churches, a lot of the building in the U.S. happened, kind of post-World War II in a flurry, and we really built out in suburbs. We've got a lot of parking lots. I know I got here today on the bus. I'll go to the office on the light rail. We don't need the surface parking that we had always anymore. We don't necessarily need the long and stretched out buildings. We tend to build up a little bit more in some places, and the context of your community will factor into all of that. But what I'm getting at with this is what we do today is a lot different than when a lot of the buildings and places that we spend time in were planned. And so stepping outside and just having a creative moment to think, what could this be, can be a really good exercise. So that creativity and just someone starting the conversation of, hey, what if? And then looking at the community need and data. So you want to make sure that your what if is aligned with what is needed. Now, a lot of us are sitting in places where we hear every single day on the phone or over email what is needed. And so many times the data just kind of confirms what we already know. But one of the reasons that this step is important is because when we go to funders or other folks who aren't sitting where we are, we need to make sure we can make the case for this is why this is a good investment, this is why this is the spot to do it in, and so that's kind of the housing need and data. The next step is some basic feasibility. So, okay, we have, we've kind of had some visioning. We know that there's a need and feel like we can address the need with the space. Well, let's now figure out how much this could cost. How many homes could actually be built here? Could there be a playground or a health facility or a grocer? And a lot of that comes into things that I sit behind my computer screen and do, so looking at market studies, looking at the zoning code, looking at entitlements, and just all the layers of different things that are going on with a property, and understanding at a deeper level what's actually possible. This is another place where working with experts is so important, because in some cases, and I think the South Sheridan example that Lee talked about is a pretty good example of this. A lot of faith entities and churches the zoning doesn't necessarily match the zoning in the surrounding neighborhood, because a lot of our zoning happened in the 1950s when a lot of the churches were being built, and they just said, oh, that's just a church. We don't have to zone it for anything else because it's a church. And so then we need to revisit that if a use other than a church is being contemplated. And in some cases, making a zoning change is possible. In other cases, making a zoning change can be really politically challenging and charged. And that, I would say was a really big factor in the South Sheridan example. In Denver, it is in an area, so as we mentioned, the congregation had already left. So the folks who were really connected to the community, they may still have lived nearby, but they didn't have that community presence that congregations do have sometimes. And so when it came to thinking about what could be built here, and can we build enough homes that bringing in the services and even just all of the construction is financially feasible? Unfortunately, the answer was no, because the political environment in this particular part of Denver, and again, not unique to Denver, was really opposed to much else other than kind of single-family development. And I would also encourage, as you put that creative hat on, try really hard not to imagine single-family homes lined up. Try to imagine, kind of some of the more robust and vibrant types of development that we see happening, kind of more modern. And so both of these, the need, the feasibility, and now this leads into the financial model, which is really looking at, okay, how much is this really going to cost? Political will aside, you can do almost anything, it just costs money. And so sometimes it's really interesting. You would think, oh my goodness, building 30 homes, we could never afford that playground, or we could never afford to have also a community room and a library and a center for tutors. And you'd be really surprised because it costs money, but there are folks out there who want to fund it. And so when I'm thinking about financial models, yes, I'm thinking about this is how much it's going to cost to pour the foundation and build the walls and put the roof on and tile it and all the kind of stuff. But I'm also thinking about who can pay for it. And because of the mission focus of the work and the really great need that we have, there are financial resources available. Now, I'm always going to tell you we need more, so never go to a local politician and say, I hear we have all the affordable housing resources that we need, because that's not necessarily true, but we are in an environment where there are resources. And so this financial model should include both how much is it going to cost, but also what are the funding sources? And a lot of times that's local to a community and can even be a contribution that a congregation is making from a sale of land, or from another financial transaction that's happening maybe to make this whole vision happen. So here, this is a little bit more detail about exactly some of the things that we do when a congregation approaches us and says, hey, we've got X, Y, and Z land, or we're combining with another congregation, what could happen here? So we're looking at title and environmental studies. A yield analysis is a fancy term for just how many houses fit here, and a lot of times there are many iterations of that. So there's kind of like, this is how much could fit with the current zoning or the zoning in the near surrounding neighborhood. This is how many homes or people could live here if it were, to be increased in density. And here's, if there was a really big dream here, what it could look like. And having those various possibilities can be helpful in moving project forward. Because as we start doing some of these pieces of the real deep feasibility analysis, this is where we identify constraints on the site. And so need to be able to have one of the great things about having a creative vision to start with is you already are in that creative thinking space to be able to adapt when constraints come up. So thinking of the first idea, we may never know that there is this easement, it's a water easement, and no matter who Katie goes and talks to, we will never be allowed to build on this one part. You can't build over it, you can't dig under it, you just can't touch it. And every site is going to have something like this, probably not that, but that is a real life example. Every site is going to have some constraints, and that's actually, I think, where some of the creativity and thoughtfulness with whoever your partners are can come to play. It's also a place where if there's a potential pitfall of if a really rigid vision has been developed and some of these things come up, might not be able to overcome it if someone had decided that is the spot that we have to build. So making sure to stay nimble, have vision and have ideas and imagination about what can be there, but being nimble enough that when you start getting some of these reports back that will dictate what is feasible and what is really, really challenging, you're able to adapt and still move forward with a vision, but come up with ways to work through some of these challenges. Other things we look at are funding sources, we look at market conditions, so like the labor that's available, different types of materials that may be appropriate, interest rates, appraisals, and then also how long this is going to take. I think one of the takeaway is that there is time needed both on someone like Archway and whoever the development expert is. There's also time needed from the congregation and time needed in the general community to pull a project along. And so it's not something that is, a quick 1, 2, or 3 year thing. One of the projects that I was working on yesterday, the home sale will happen in 2027. And that's great. We're spending the time to do the work now, and time flies. 2027 will be right around the corner.
So what are these days here?
This is how long the analysis takes. That's a really good point. That is not how long it takes to use all of the analysis. Yeah, my job would be way different.
Let me speak to the church side of it, because Washington Park, UCC, First Plymouth, 6th Avenue, Kirk of the Bonnie Brae, Salem, those are 5 congregations within 10 to 15 minutes of each other, and we're all experiencing similar kinds of challenges that many of you are experiencing in your congregation. We sit on 6 lots in Washington Park. One of our church members sold her lifelong home that she's lived in since she was 8 years old for $1.2 million, and they scraped it the next day. So it's a very wealthy part of town, and I spent 2.5 hours with our church leadership last night, listening to them talk about what they fear about moving forward and perhaps selling the property, and what the possibilities are. And we had a facilitator helping us get through that. At one point, we thought these 5 churches could sit down around a table with a conference minister and develop a new vision that all of us would jump behind and support. And then we remembered that we are congregational churches, and every church has to decide its own path forward And then perhaps out of those decisions, there can be a unified vision, a hub. You know, just be honest with you, Washington Park's land represents significant resources. Could we build senior housing there on those lots? Probably not. If you have lots that are selling for $1 million,
I was gonna ask that at Wash, my sister used to live in Wash Park
yeah.
area, and, so part of the feasibility study is the neighborhood, and will they welcome affordable housing?
And you know, I've got a church-state mind that operates a little bit, and you know, maybe if Wash Park kept 10% ownership, you know, we could keep others from trying to tell us what to do with our land, but I don't think that would pass legal muster. Yes.
I wanted to say something about this. I think it comes also to showing what affordable housing can be.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
Because when I joined Embrace 2.5 years ago, and every time when I go to our communities, it is not institutionalized. You won't tell it's affordable housing. You won't tell it's really low income housing. So it's still, okay, the apartments are small, but it's clean. Colors, we have paintings, we did now rehab after everything, like, I was involved in the committee that we chose the art. I would put that art in my house, and you all would put that art in your house. So it comes to like breaking down this
Stereotypical,
right. And I know Leading Age has, I think it's called Opening Doors, where they are working at a national and local level to try to break these stereotypes. And I think, it comes to more and more meetings where you go and you show photos, you show videos, you bring people to visit your communities and to see, no, it's not, we're not going to bring like, I don't know what, obscure type of communities.
And doing that community piece takes time. And if we could do the decision making within the congregations and the community education as well at the same time, it still is going to take 2 to 3 years just to get off the ground. But or is that about right? I'm outside of my lane here.
If everything goes smoothly, it'd be
Yeah.
that would be fast.
Yeah.
And so, maybe this is just a California problem, but the biggest stumbling block to the development of affordable housing in Alameda County, and I think, you know, probably the whole state, is the zoning issues.
Yes.
You know, I spent an entire summer going over every single potential property in the city of Hayward where we might possibly be able to stand up a TAY shelter, transitional aid use shelter. And I mean, I narrowed it to, you know, out of, I don't know, something like 30 potential sites. I narrowed it to 5, and then at the end of the day, there was really only one to be considered because of zoning. You know, and that was a property owned by Hayward School District, and we worked out a deal where we did a 10-year ground lease, and the construction that we, you know, proposed was the kind that doesn't have, it's anchored, but it's not, it doesn't have basement. Somebody here can help me get what the right word is for that kind of construction. But anyway, you know, but I mean, that was crazy. I had to organize 50 people to make that happen, and pull every stop with the school board and, you know, stuff like that, and city council. But you know, the example with the zoning thing is like that. I mean, Hayward's not unique, and Hayward's a blue-collar town, and we got a lot of poor people, and it would help a lot of people in our town, and still it was a zoning problem and stuff. So there's a guy named Senator Scott Wiener, who is a state senator from the San Francisco area, who has put forward legislation in California to allow to automatically grant faith-based 501c3s the capacity to stand up housing on their property. And I hope that's gonna pass. I mean, it's still not a cakewalk, right? You still, I mean, you don't wanna like poke people in the eye and say, well, we're putting this here anyway, you know, cause that's not gonna turn out good. But, it's really a challenge. And I mean, there is a state mandate that every municipality has got to build affordable housing in California. And so guess what? The combination of the zoning problems and that state mandate is creating a lot of litigation. So the only people that are winning are the lawyers. And they got houses on there.
Right, right.
But a lot of other people are, you know, like, I have 15 new residents in my neighborhood, you know, who are regularly on our campus and have no roof over their head, except when we're open.
And I
You
think
have
that's,
housing in, zoning in Houston.
No, Houston is the largest municipality in the country with no zoning. But we have another problem. So people will build, we'll have a CDC come in and build something that they label as affordable housing. But they'll only do 10 to 5 to 10% for somebody, for teachers. They'll put, you know, 3 teachers, 2 policemen and 2 firefighters there, and they have met the requirement of being affordable housing. But the other 85 units are at market rate. So although zoning is not our problem, development switch and bait is a bigger problem.
And it's the
But
tax
that's a easier
abatement.
model to sustain financially. This is why it's just the dollar, unfortunately. We only have to do affordable. This is not easy. It's not easy to do only affordable housing, and they combine both to make the dollar work.
yep, and I think, so some of what we're touching on now is also the magic of having congregations and folks who are so deeply rooted in communities involved. Because in California, in Denver too, for any new development or change that we want to make, we know there will be people who own their single family homes or whatever who will show up and oppose it. They will donate to our council campaigns. They will donate to, you know, they'll put their money, they'll hire lawyers to prevent us. We've been sued from achieving our vision. We know that will happen. But the great thing is congregations can show up and organize. That's what you all do. That's a part of the DNA of the groups and organizations, human services, social services, faith-based congregations. You can show up too. You're paying attention to zoning. How many people do you think you could just go stop on the corner and say, hey, do you know what about the zoning code? No, not many, but you are paying attention. So I think that's like, Sandy, go ahead.
I just want to say amen. Amen to that. And one of the things that you know, we in the UCC Washington office, we work primarily on the federal level. But you know, I tell people all the time, like, go to the zoning meeting. You know, like you know, they're like, oh, I can't make a difference. I can't make a difference. And those are the places. And you're absolutely right about that. Our churches and congregations are the people who can be there and be the voices. Don't neglect, you know, the city layer of government. Don't neglect the regional, the state. So I'm just saying amen.
Do you have staff that can help? I mean, you know, I have now racked up some serious experience in community organizing, but most of the pastors in Northern California campus have never had a class and have never done it.
Nope.
So,
and I think that's why who you partner with and the experts that you surround yourself with is so important.
Sure.
Because even you have this wealth of expertise, it doesn't mean you want to be doing it all day and after everything else you do, right? And so making sure you're bringing in experts, and this is
and
where
you guys
that
do that,
Archway
right?
does. Yes,
Oh, that's
yes,
awesome.
absolutely.
Sebastian can probably speak to that.
You know what, we certainly have a lot of experience, and we'd be happy to give you some guidance, high level on the front end, wherever you are, not just Colorado, but we also have relationships all over the country, because many of us have been in affordable housing nationally, regionally, whatever. I think Enterprise is a great resource. So, you know, I wouldn't hesitate to reach out to us. If we can't help you directly, we will get you help and do what we can to support you. So, yeah.
And so we are at time. I want to make sure that you all have all of our contact information. And also encourage you as you're walking out and as you're going through the rest of your day, talk to each other too and swap stories and experience and contact information, because what has happened in Minnesota could happen in Texas, and what happened in Texas may be relevant in DC, and you never know where these relationships will lead you, and if nothing else, you may find a dinner buddy for after the art museum today. So I'll close with a plug. Archway is really excited to host a tour of Denver's art museum. I know you all have spent a lot of time in windowless conference rooms, so really encourage you, get out. We have a beautiful art museum. We'd love to see you again, and really we're excited to sponsor this and want you to get to see a little bit of our city.
I think that's where we're eating lunch, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's give our
Yeah.
presenters a hand.